Hello, I'm Henry Keane. We are UATV. Welcome to the weekly wrap-up. Today in the episode, this week rained strikes on Russian military and oil facilities. A lot to remember indeed. The cold season started and so does infrastructure war, terror and retaliation, Russia versus Ukraine. Hidden assets of the Kremlin who allowed Russia to shatter international law and order. Week of Ukrainian strikes against Russia indeed. We start our weekly episode with the compilation of weeks Ukraine's own sanctions on Russia's energy and military facilities, a fiery show worth watching. A combined heat and power plant in Russia's Bryansk region became a target. Russian Telegram channels report a missile strike that partially halted the operation of local energy infrastructure. Eyewitnesses said a large fire broke out at the site of impact. Also, Belgrade's thermal power plant, Luch Ray in English, lived up to its name only briefly. 3 flashes followed by pitch-black darkness. According to reports, a strike targeted the gas turbine power substation. As a result, parts of the city and surrounding areas were left without power. Water supply disruptions also reported. With military targets in Russia usually having a combined purpose, serving the needs of both the military and civilians, the Russian civilian population will face the same thing as the Kremlin attempts to exhaust the Ukrainian civilian population in turn with energy and water outages.
Росія повинна чітко знати, що
Russia must clearly know that civilized countries differ from the wild by the fact that they never start first and are not aggressors. But that does not mean they are weak, and one should not show weakness. If they threaten a blackout, for example, of the capital of Ukraine, then in the Kremlin they should know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia.
In the Russian city of Dzerzhinsky, a fire broke out following airstrikes. Local sources report the Sverdlov plant, part of Russia's military-industrial complex, a significant one, was damaged. The facility is one of the country's largest producers of industrial explosives. At least 30% of its output goes to the military in particular. Another 30% is explosive materials in general. 35% is industrial chemicals, and the remaining 5% is machinery manufacturing. During the night of October 6th, Ukrainian drones also attacked Russian-occupied Crimea. It was particularly loud in Feodosia, where a major oil depot, the Feodosia Oil Transshipment Terminal, was targeted, damaging fuel storage tanks. The terminal has been targeted many times before as it supplies fuel to Russian military units stationed in Crimea and all along the southern front. Not all is good in Putin's kingdom. Factories ablaze, power outages in big cities, and even on missiles meant to stop Ukrainian drones are now hitting local houses instead. Ukrainian drones keep causing mounting problems every day. The pressure kicks in seriously for Russia's energy and military sectors of economy, as Russia simply has no other sectors of economy really. On Tuesday, October 7th, a fire broke out at the Ural turbine plant in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg. The official cause of the fire has not been disclosed until this day, but the plant is a significant facility for Russia and its criminal war of aggression against Ukraine, as it is producing equipment not only for civilian purposes, such as for thermal power plants, hydroelectric stations and industrial energy systems, but also for the Russian military. This means it is directly connected to supplying power for the production of missiles, drones and other military-related equipment. The energy turbines manufactured there were used to power such military facilities. While Russia's weapons production often draws attention to something big, really like missile factories and tank repair plants, far less is said about these small but crucial facilities that keep the defense industry operational. One of these is the Novosibirsk solder plant, a manufacturer whose products underpin the Russia's military ability to produce electronic drones and precision weaponry. A major fire after a possible missile strike on inside explosion has been reported at the premises of this plant, known for its work in several key sectors, including production of electronics and microchips, repair and assembly of electrical equipment, defense industry operations, including soldering components for weapons, communications, and radioelectronic systems. Now, summarizing all the above said and watched over the last week, such targets on the territory of Russia were hit. Industrial sites of the military production sector. Also, oil processing plants, which used to supply most of its gasoline produced to the fueling stations. Power plants and power transformers in the frontline regions to disrupt Russian logistics deep in the rear. Really a result-rich week. Indeed, let us keep up the pace and observe and analyze the efficiency of the strikes in the long run. The Ukrainian Defense Forces counter-attacking Dobropillia, and it continues according to Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Alexander Syrskyi. He visited the positions and spoke with commanders himself. According to the Commander-in-Chief, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are identifying and eliminating saboteurs and groups of Russian occupiers who have been encircled.
In total, 180.8 square kilometers of Donbas territory were liberated during the operation, and nearly 213 square kilometers were cleared of saboteurs. I have identified the problematic issues and needs of our offensive group and issued the necessary instructions. Counter-sabotage operations will continue. The defense will remain active. Measures are also being taken to prevent the enemy's advance in the Pokrovsk direction, improve logistics and protect roads and critical infrastructure. Alexander Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The Kremlin leader will have to lose 1 million troops to seize eastern Ukraine. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during a meeting with journalists. The Ukrainian leader also said that dialogue is currently underway between Kiev and Washington at various levels, including at the intelligence and military level. The US president also realized that Putin had lied to him.
Trump understands that everything Putin sold him in Alaska as supposed Russian military capabilities doesn't actually work. This means he was trying to sell him low-quality goods. I think anyone would be insulted by being lied to. What happened is what I told him. The Russians won't take the East. And if they want to do so, Putin will have to bury 1 million of his people, because we understood how many he had already buried, taking 30% of our east since the start of the full-scale war, and we predict what he will have to do to try to take all of Donbas. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, during a press meeting.
More than 85% of Russian targets on the front line are hit by drones, according to Alexander Kamyshin, advisor to the President of Ukraine on strategic issues. He notes that over 2 million drones were produced in Ukraine last year alone. Ukrainian long-range drones are striking Russian territory, effectively bringing the war back to where it started, onto Russian soil. According to Kamyshin, only 2 countries, Ukraine and Russia, of course, are currently capable of effectively using UAVs. He also warned that Moscow could attempt a large-scale drone attack on European countries in the future, so the continent must be prepared.
Last year, more than 2.2 million drones were manufactured in Ukraine. Currently, over 85% of all frontline targets are hit by drones. Ukrainian long-range attack drones have set Russia ablaze and helped bring the war back to enemy territory. Believe me, one day Russia could launch a large-scale drone attack on Europe. We must be prepared for that moment. Alexander Kamyshin, advisor to the President of Ukraine on strategic issues, during the 3rd International Defense Industries Forum.
The first train from Pyongyang carrying A95-grade gasoline arrived at Vladivostok 1 railway station in Russia. The fuel from North Korea was sent to Russia as humanitarian aid, believe it or not, to help the country cope with the consequences of the chain of failures of one major oil refinery after another. According to Serhiy Bratchuk, spokesman for the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, China had previously promised to help Russia overcome the fuel crisis, however, not for free, of course. And the longer the war against Ukraine continues, the more dire the petrol situation in Russia will become. The fuel shortage in Russia has reached 20%. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy commented on the success of Ukrainian armed forces' long-range strikes deep into Russian territory, emphasizing that Russian cities like Ust-Luga and Primorsk are now within reach of Ukrainian attacks. Russia launched a combined missile and drone attack on Kiev overnight, leaving parts of the capital without electricity and causing disruptions to the water supply. New Voice of Ukraine publishes a photo report showing the aftermath of the latest attack on Ukraine's capital. According to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 12 people were injured, with 8 hospitalized as of Friday morning. In different parts of the city, debris from a downed drone hits a multi-story residential building, igniting apartments on several floors. The facade and windows of 10-story building were damaged just as well, and the car caught fire in a courtyard. Debris from intercepted missile also fell on open areas of the left bank districts, damaging nearby facilities. Dnipro River divides Ukrainian capital Kyiv into 2 parts, and as a result of Russian terror strikes targeting critical infrastructure, Kyiv's left bank was left without power overnight. In the morning, Ukrenergo reported that emergency blackouts have been introduced in the capital and 9 other regions of the city. Energy workers continue restoring the power grid right now, and they say that shutdowns will be lifted as soon as possible once the system stabilizes. As per Zelensky's Russian forces launched over 450 drones and more than 30 missiles just overnight, targeting literally, I quote Ukrainian President, everything that makes life normal. Russia also carried out massive strikes on the Dnipro region, sparking fires at energy facilities and injuring 3 people in the city of Kryvyi Rih. Damage was also reported in Zaporizhia, Cherkasy and Poltava regions.
Elimination of the consequences of the Russian attack on the energy sector continues at many critical infrastructure facilities. A cynical and calculated attack, over 450 drones and more than 3 dozen missiles against everything that ensures normal life and what the Russians want to deprive us of. As of now, more than 20 people are known to have been injured across the country. All are being provided with the necessary assistance. Unfortunately, a child died in Zaporizhia as a result of the attack. My sincere condolences to his family and friends. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Both the drones and the missiles that Russia used to hit Ukraine are not Russian. Shahed drones are licensed by Iran and the ballistics are of North Korean origin. So we come to the question, does Russia really have a deficit of those weapons of domestic production? And should the United States maybe take advantage of this and quickly supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, so we can help Russia to fill in the gap? Sort of. We asked the military expert Vladislav Seleznyov for his opinion on the matter.
I think the issue is that the Russians have access to relatively cheap resources, which are supplied both from North Korea and from the Islamic Republic of Iran. I don't think the Russians have completely exhausted their ability to produce their own ballistic missiles. But it seems that right now the Russians are in the process of stockpiling the necessary missile weaponry to continue carrying out missile and drone terror against our country. What do we need to understand? Of course, 1, 2, 3, or even a dozen Tomahawks won't fundamentally change the situation. But if we're talking about the supply of several dozen, or maybe even hundreds of these missiles, that would be a significant argument, especially at the negotiating table. Because the only factor Putin recognizes today is the factor of force. If the Ukrainian military is strengthened with such a powerful missile component in addition to the missiles and drones currently produced by the Ukrainian defense industry, this will undoubtedly significantly bolster our negotiating position and will quite likely force Putin to make certain concessions.
As the strikes continue as part of Russian criminal aggression and terror, we remember those who consciously allowed Putin to unfold his aggression. In particular and overall, to deprive the world of the rules of international law and order by shattering it and creating obstacles for international organizations to act, up until making them completely useless. The UN, OSCE, International Atomic Energy Agency, they can do absolutely nothing with Putin and his reign of terror. Like, for example, occupying the largest European nuclear power plant of Zaporizhia, attacking several countries in wars of aggression, spreading violence and sending assault drones into European airspace. Such impotence is the direct consequence of the gradual process that started long ago, and several world leaders of that time did nothing to prevent it from happening and to deter Putin. 2 are the top of the heap indeed, Angela Merkel and Barack Obama. And so Angela Merkel is now blaming Poland and the Baltic states for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She's doing this while striking a pose, promoting her new book, posing for photos with Viktor Orban and insisting that he was never a Russian Trojan horse. Long story short, Merkel is trying to rewrite her deeply damaging legacy. But let's talk about her real legacy, the one Europe is still paying for today. Aside from Vladimir Putin, Merkel is arguably one of the figures most responsible for enabling the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She blocked both Ukraine and Georgia from joining NATO and the EU, shrugged off Russia's aggression in both countries, and doubled down on dependence on Russian gas, building Nord Stream, while Eastern European nations warned exactly many times where it would lead. Merkel dismissed their warnings as exaggerations. She clung to the illusion of change through trade, a cornerstone of German foreign policy for decades, but instead of moderating Russia, this policy made the Kremlin richer, bolder and more militarized, of course. The EU's political culture, molded by Merkel's influence, avoids hyperbole even as the obvious unfolds. Russian drones striking Ukraine. Lavrov openly declares war on the West, yet some European leaders even still today mumble with their eyes wide shut their usual mantra, no, 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 we're not at war. Merkel says she feels she's being unfairly blamed for Russia's war in Ukraine because of her position at the 2008 NATO summit, where she opposed granting Ukraine a membership action plan. In an interview with the Der Spiegel, marking the release of her memoir, Merkel confirmed that this perception is not just a feeling, but, as she puts it, a fact. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, for example, called on former French President Nicolas Sarkozy and me to visit Bucha after the horrific massacre, clearly implying that our position in Bucharest bore some responsibility for the death there, Merkel says. When asked in turn why she didn't act then more decisively if she understood Putin's ambitions so clear, Merkel replied that she did draw conclusions now. Responding to criticism that she failed to effectively deter Putin, didn't bolster Germany's defense capabilities, withheld arms for Ukraine and left Germany dependent on Russian gas, Merkel said that many important facts are being forgotten. For instance, she added, both Ukraine and Poland were not fundamentally opposed to the import of Russian gas through their territories as they benefited financially from it. Merkel also said she believes that in the early years of her presidency, Vladimir Putin had no intention of attacking Ukraine whatsoever, but that his plans evolved over time, partly in reaction to the West behavior. So she is basically reproducing one of the key Russian propaganda theses, that Russian aggression against Ukraine is the fault of Europe and not Russia itself. Polish Prime Minister Radosław Sikorski has responded to Merkel's recent interview in which she claimed that Poland and the Baltic states did not support the EU's policy towards Russia. Sikorski dismissed Merkel's version of events, saying it was as true as what she wrote in her memoirs, that no one from Central Europe protested against Nord Stream.
Just look at how the German government reacted in 2007 when I said we didn't like deals being made over our heads. So apparently the Chancellor forgot how her own government responded to our protests. Radosław Sikorski, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, during a press conference.
In the conversation with a Hungarian journalist available on YouTube, Merkel said that by June 2021 she had the impression that Putin no longer took the Minsk agreement seriously. She explained that she and Macron wanted to create a new format to allow the EU to engage directly with Putin, but not everyone supported this idea, mainly the Baltic states and Poland, who feared there was no unified EU policy towards Russia. In response to the growing controversy, Merkel's office stated that her remarks speak for themselves and are nothing new indeed. And another leader of the Western country, America, Barack Obama, has let Putin annex Crimea and just invade Ukrainian Donbass with impunity. So no serious sanctions were imposed on Russia for the war. The US, then president, often met with Vladimir Putin. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline was finished, and as the result, Mr. Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for great efforts to reinforce international diplomacy. And in 2014, the entire system of the rule-based order in Europe just collapsed when Putin got what he wanted. And that is a piece of Ukraine that served as a bridgehead for the future 2002 invasion. But more has been done already by the now President of the United States, Donald Trump. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering a ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel. The nomination was formally submitted by Republican Congressman Baltic from Georgia, who said Trump played an extraordinary, historic role in ending the 12-day war between the two nations. But in the end, this year prize was given to Maria Corina Machado, leader of the Venezuelan opposition. She stands against Maduro's authoritarian regime and for freedom of speech. We can only wish for the prize to be given to the President Trump next year for making Russia stop its criminal war of aggression against Ukraine. If so, nobody will have any doubt who's indeed earned the prize. It was Henry Keane. We are UATV. Thank you so very much for standing with Ukraine. Please subscribe so as to stay tuned to what is happening in the world, shown to you from Ukrainian perspective. Goodbye.